Hello and welcome back to Coinscrum Markets. I'm thrilled to be joined by Kantorovich, Head of Institutional Coverage at FalconX. Good to see you, Aya.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for having me. Excited for the conversation today.
Very welcome, very welcome. Bit of a big week, so lots to talk about. The Coinbase IPO yesterday, so we'll come back to that. But let's just first look at the past week or so in the market from your perspective. FalconX, prime brokerage platform, you're plugged into all the exchanges, you've got clients across the globe, so you've got very good visibility of what clients are doing, especially at the institutional level. Tell us what you're seeing. What changes have you seen over the last month or so?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. As you mentioned, it's a big week for crypto. I think huge validation for the space with the Coin IPO, and we're seeing that as well on the volume side. Previously, it was very much, I would say, a sideways market. We were seeing volatility definitely slow down, both on the spot market, which we face directly, as well as our clients who face the derivatives market. And so volatility, it definitely wasn't the Jan and Feb that everyone was seeing this year. And so the Coin IPO really helped spark that volatility back up. As it, just comparing last week to this week, what we're seeing really interesting patterns. On the breaking it down by like client personas, on the prop side, we service prop shops. They were going from short BTC to ultra short BTC this week. On the OTC side, we were seeing something very similar, where we saw the same buying amount, but significantly more selling this week on BTC. On the systematic funds, we were actually seeing something different. So volumes increased 8x. We were seeing significantly more buying this week from systematics on the BTC front. And then something that I think is really, really interesting is we face a lot of institutions that have retail on the other side. I would say OTC sometimes faces both institutions and retail, but we face a lot of retail aggregators, as we call them. And what was really interesting from last week into this week is that volumes increased by over 180%, heavily skewed buys. So, if you just kind of look at the blend between whether it was institutional flow or retail flow, on the institutional side, very much split, half and half. And then on the retail flow, typically very much skewed buys on BTC.
Right, interesting. And so, I mean, I guess one reason could be, in the run up to the Coinbase IPO. Did you notice anything regional around that? Was that kind of US focused because of like the NASDAQ listing, and that was more of a focus for retail buyers there on Bitcoin, or was that kind of more of a global thing?
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely US focused. And then one of the things that I thought was really interesting, it felt like folks were buying the news. So you were seeing a lot more activity into Tuesday, going into Wednesday and the actual IPO, as opposed to like Wednesday throughout the day. Then it felt like people were very much watching the markets, seeing how it impacted the price of Bitcoin. But it did feel like people were very much buying or selling the news leading into the event.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, a couple of other things you touched on there. Volatility, I mean, we've seen, things have picked up a little bit. I mean, they've definitely been calming down, but the longer term trend is still very much down. Even as we're making all-time highs, it's like, I'm sure your clients are using your TWAPs and VWAPs to kind of, buying every dip seems to be getting bought into. Those algos just kick back in and start ticking back up there. And you mentioned also that you were seeing kind of a bias to shorting Bitcoin. We saw alts outperforming Bitcoin last week. While Bitcoin wasn't making new high, Bitcoin came back. You're seeing this definitely doesn't feel like similar price action to previous like big highs, major highs. This feels quite different right now. And also with institutional clients here, and they're kind of taking advantage of shorting positions. Are you seeing them trade spreads between like Bitcoin versus the alts and trade that spread between them as well? And playing on those rotational moves?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned that. I would say TWAPs and VWAPs is definitely one of our largest product focuses that has come up over the last couple of weeks. So exactly to your point, volatility is slowed. But another thing we're seeing is very much this almost whether you call it third or fourth altcoin rally. So it very much feels like the attention right now is in some of these altcoins, whether it's the Binance Smart Chain projects, whether it is the L2s that are diversifying away from Ethereum. But it does feel like a lot of what you're seeing is both in the altcoins and some of the retail focused top 10 names. So you're seeing Link, you're seeing Cardano, you're seeing XRP from folks internationally who have access to trading it. You're seeing, again, more of these retail names that you primarily weren't seeing any price action in probably the last year or two, coming back up, in addition to, a lot of these, I would say, more DeFi and altcoin names. The one area where we haven't seen as much action is the blue chips. I would say that's an area that's been lagging significantly, whether that's because the focus has changed over to, Binance Smart Chain, and trying to find a blockchain that has lower fees. That could be one narrative, or the NFT space has kind of directed attention away from the blue chips. That's another narrative. The volumes are there, but the price action just hasn't reflected that yet.
Yeah, we'll come back to that, Vic, 'cause I know James Bennett from ByteTree, he touched on that on the recording on that we published on Wednesday, looking at some of that data and talking about BNB token and Binance Smart Chain, and it's picking up a significant amount of traction in the DeFi ecosystem because of its low fees. So that can be an interesting one to watch. Maybe we'll talk about those tokens, I guess in the context of the Coinbase IPO. So what was your take on, how successful was it? Definitely didn't seem like a disaster. I think there's been worse kind of things out there. So what's your thoughts, and what were your clients saying about it?
Yeah, as you mentioned, there definitely been worse direct listings. I would say it was definitely a success. I think, for the industry as a whole, on the crypto side of it, whether it was service providers, crypto native funds, we've been waiting for a moment like this for a really long time. We were speaking about this earlier. We've been in this space for a while, and so having a validation like this, exposed to providing institutional accessibility. We've been talking about this institutional adoption for a really long time, and having that happen to this scale was pretty big. And so you were seeing a lot of excitement in the space. Obviously that was reflected in BTC's price. In terms of just what we were seeing as well, whether it was like new clients that are onboarding with us, or just conversations with institutions, is, Coin provides accessibility where, very similar to if you look at Grayscale's products, you don't have to worry about custody. You don't have to worry about, anything pertaining to regulation. It's easily accessible. And so a lot of institutions, what we haven't, I don't think everyone realizes, is a lot of family offices, a lot of these asset managers and allocators, they haven't gotten approval from their board just yet to access Bitcoin directly. And so, being able to trade coin gives you accessibility. If you looked at like Coinbase's S1, right, from 2019 to 2020, you have like 50% exposure to BTC volumes. You have like in 2020, I think it was 40% exposure to all these altcoins. And so you have basically this almost basket of exposure to these tokens, in addition to, obviously they're them operating as a business and market share, ability to scale and, create revenue, generate revenue, and continue that trend. But you do have, all of a sudden this, easy access to a basket of tokens that you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. And I think, what was interesting that we saw as well, just in the macro side, is you were seeing a lot of companies that had access to Bitcoin, whether it was Square, Tesla, were down 5%, MicroStrategy down 15% yesterday. And so potentially even rotation of capital into Coinbase, where you get more of that.
Yeah, I think, I guess the more that do come to market, public offerings, I mean, outside the US, there's obviously a lot more options on the ETF side. Wait to be seen who gets the first one. But we've seen that reflected in the Grayscale premium going to a discount. So we need to watch out for that. But if you look at from last year, the story was, well, that ability to access the market in a similar way through MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is trading at about 50% of its all-time high as well. So I guess tackling the ultimate underlying valuation issue is going to be an interesting thing, but I guess that will even out as we get more listed companies. People can diversify a bit more. We won't see this sort of kind of these big ebbs and flows with people rushing in because it's the only option. And then as you say, people will be able to diversify more broadly across the industry, which should hopefully be a healthy thing. So, I mean, you touched on it earlier. You mentioned some of these other kind of exchange tokens as well, and what they've been doing. And, the blue chip, or some of these, have certainly been outperforming the crypto blue chips, Binance Coin, you know, BNB token,
Yeah.
huge rally this week. What's this signaling to the market? You know, these tokens, I mean, are they quasi equities anyway? I mean, I guess people, they're not equity, well, certainly they wouldn't call them equities. What do you think is going to happen there with these other exchange tokens that, you know, FTX have got, OKCoin, all of them seem to have them?
Right. Yeah. So, you know, I think one of the challenge that any institutional investor has in this space is, how do I value this token? And you mentioned it too, right? Right now, Coinbase is our only IPO, you know, direct listing. It's the only valuation we have. And even investors trying to value Coinbase are struggling because they're comparing to ICE, they're comparing to CME. And so that's not necessarily the same. And so, you know, I think on that front, we'll probably see, and we're seeing it now, as we had discussed earlier, whether through SPACs or direct listings, we'll probably see, you know, upwards of like 10 cryptocurrency companies listing directly onto exchanges in the US. And I'm very excited for that. To your point, exactly, it will give us a lot more data points in terms of how do I value this company as well across the board in crypto. And so you're seeing something very similar on the exchange token side, right? And so people are trying to value these companies, and it's not just exchange tokens. It's not just the BNB, the you know, Huobi token, the OKX token, the FTX token, FTT, which I think is, you know, BNB and FTT are the best performing exchange tokens. You're also seeing it on, you know, the AMM side, right? So you're seeing it on Uniswap, where these have very similar, you know, structures. And so you're seeing very similar, you know, appreciations in the price, in the valuations, because folks are looking at, all right, well, what assets are supported on Coinbase that are tradable? And then what assets are supported on Uniswap that are tradable, and vice versa, you know, these like exchanges such as Binance and FTX. And so I think that's going to be really interesting. The other thing that I think will be interesting is, you know, this tokenization of, or even, you know, Binance offering fractional shares of different stocks, right? It's very similar to what you saw on the Robinhood side. And so I think what you'll see is something very interesting, similar to what you've seen, a project I really like with Terra and Luna. You'll see that it's crypto, not just for crypto and cryptocurrency native tokens and assets, but crypto that's now expanding into, you know, US equities, right? And securities. And so if they're able to successfully launch, you know, the ability to buy and sell shares of companies on their exchanges, suddenly, you know, that valuation, you have to take it into account, is going to be significantly larger. And Coinbase can do, you know, the very same thing. Like at the end of the day, if I was, you know, and sitting in ICE's seat or, you know, CME seat, that's what I would be looking at. That's, you know, kind of the threat in my mind, is that this is not just for crypto. Wait until, you know, the underlying technology can be expanded in a way, you know, in a regulatory sound way in the US that's also faces, you know, some of these equities. I think that's where it becomes really interesting as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned some of that, you know, people making comparisons with Coinbase and major exchanges like NASDAQ, CME, and like around valuations. And, you know, we've up until now, we've had, you know, crypto's existed in its own world. But at the end of the day, you know, I think people that have been around for some time have said, well, you know, ultimately there's just a new asset class, and they will coexist with existing asset classes that aren't going to disappear for any reason anytime soon. Which way will it go? Will the kind of will the new crazy innovators just kind of eat the lunch of those big exchanges and, you know, just offer a kind of a complete offering for crypto and kind of take on their form of business? Or will the old guys adapt and, you know, meet somewhere in the middle? I don't know. Well, remains to be seen. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to watch. A little bit short on time, so just before we go, you know, there's always news, and forget about quite quickly what else has been in the news recently. You know, DeFi is obviously still hugely creating a huge amount of interest, and, you know, you're seeing your forefront of seeing the institutional adoption play out. I think, you know, a few months ago, people were saying, well, these guys are coming in, they're being quite vanilla, buying Bitcoin, that's it, maybe toying with Ether. Are they becoming degen? Institutionals going full degen now?
Yeah, yeah. If that's the one thing you take from this video is that institutions are degen as well too. It's not limited to cryptocurrency native. I think, you know, looking at the data, if you look at our Q1 relative to Q4, in Q1, 50% of the clients that were onboarding with us are non-crypto natives. These are family offices. You know, these are just institutions. And of that, 20%, over 20% are from traditional finance. These are asset allocators and asset managers that come from Soros, Peter Thiel, Goldman. And, you know, they are looking at TWAPs and VWAPs in, you know, non-major tokens, right? And so what's interesting there is that it's not just crypto native. The narrative is sticking everywhere. People are seeing value. And I think what's interesting too with DeFi specifically is when you look at it, you have total value locked, right? You have a lot of numbers and usage that's really helpful. You can calculate APY, you can calculate, you know, what's the percentage of volume going in and out, and where is it going, and what are the fees that are being charged, and therefore reflected in the governance token, and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot more data that you can calculate on some of these tokens, whereas like I wouldn't say, you know, institutions are super degen where you know, all of them are buying flow or NFT tokens. I wouldn't go that far with it, but I would definitely say that, you know, the adoption is moving across the token names, and you're seeing it, you know, especially when institutions see some of these ETH gas fees. It's very clear that you need to diversify and look away and to other projects. And I think it provides, you know, crypto is that interesting medium where you can be an investor via a governance token into a project that you think is going to scale and you know, be the next ETH 2.0. And so you're seeing a lot of that thought process, a lot of, you know, the trading ideas that we're pitching on the desk are not top major tokens. They're very much down the totem pole.
Yeah, yeah. Never a dull moment, always stuff to keep an eye out on. Aya, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll have you back very soon to get kind of some of these very interesting insights that you're able to offer us. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. It was great fun. I appreciate it.